The software sector has undergone tremendous transformation this year, with everyone trying to gear their product suites towards AI. Madrona Ventures had a front seat to it all with a portfolio of companies of every size, stage, and subsector. The company also does a ton of investing in the biotech sector, which I'm hoping to get into. I want to bring on Matt McIlwain, Managing Director at Madrona, for a conversation about all that. Matt, welcome to TITV. It's great to have you here.
Thanks for having me on the show, Akash.
So, I want to talk a little bit about software investing broadly right now. And, we're in the spirit of predictions here, and I know we're making predictions for 2026. I've sort of been thinking about how the structure of the software market is going to change over the next couple years. And, as it relates to the public companies, the working theory I have, and I want to run this by you, you tell me what you think of it. We've got these, I don't know, 80, 90 top public SaaS companies right now. They've been on the market for a while. I think over the next 3 years, what we might see is the number of those top 90 companies. It might shrink a bit because some companies will go private. There'll be some consolidation because a lot of these companies are starting to sort of step on each other's toes. Um, and then you'll if let's say it goes from 90 to, I don't know, 60, right? The other 30 will be these top AI startups that start to go public as they grow. And I think what you might be left with is some of these, big, chunky software businesses that do a lot of different things. They buy some things they didn't know they needed. And then you have the faster growing cohort. Is that kind of the way software investors see it broadly from your perspective?
No, look, I think that we are in both a time of disruption and we're in a time of questioning the durability of any business. And so that's both true about these larger public SaaS companies, as well as it's true about the seemingly fast growing private companies. And why is that? Well, it's because every layer of the stack is changing. The user interfaces are changing. The data models are changing. The workflows are changing. And we're going from systems of record to systems of intelligence. And what does that mean? Well, it means that we're dealing with both structured data and unstructured data, structured workflows and unstructured workflows. So you've got to be pretty nimble if you are Salesforce or ServiceNow or Atlassian. And I think that some of those will excel in this cycle and some of those will not as much. And the same thing can be true of private companies. We do this intelligent application 40 list. We've been doing it for 5 years. It's the 40 top private AI companies with an emphasis on applied AI. And what's interesting is that no company except Databricks, which is one of the 10 enablers in that list, has been on the list all 5 years. So that tells you that even within private companies, there's a challenge in durability. The last thing I would say is that, I think we are going to see, here's a prediction for 2026. We're going to see more private to private mergers. We already saw that uptick in the back half of this year. 2 of the companies in our portfolio, for example, Clary merging with SalesLoft, and then Statsig being bought by OpenAI, 2 private to private companies. I think you're going to see, because of the thesis you have, that not all are going to survive, that one of the ways you're going to define the winners is by mergers, both private to private mergers and then public to private mergers.
Right. I want to ask you, if we sort of take a step out of startup land, to the extent that you could call some of these multi-billion-dollar company startups, let's go over to the land of hyperscalers. You are based in Seattle, and we've got Amazon and Microsoft there, and it's a story I'm sure you've been watching closely. I wonder what your sense is of Amazon and Microsoft's current place in the AI race. We've all this news about Google, right? And we just had this story published this morning about Microsoft, how Satya Nadella is really taking a really boots on the ground approach to helping them accelerate their AI adoption. I mean, how do you think the story around those 2 hyperscalers particularly is going to change in 2026?
Well, we do know both those companies. And, it's just also interesting to think of a year ago, there was a lot of skepticism about Google. And I don't
Totally.
think there's nearly that much skepticism right now about Amazon and AWS in particular, or Microsoft, but I think they're both a little out of favor right now. But let's disaggregate 2 things. One thing I'm highly confident they're going to continue to excel in is in the cloud service provider layer, the infrastructure as a service layer. And this is where there's a massive tailwind that AI is pulling. If you talk to Matt Garman, if you talk to Satya, what they're going to likely tell you is because of AI, we're getting way more workloads coming into the cloud. And that's why you see reaccelerating growth at AWS, for example, and continued strong, 30+% growth at Azure. The strategic question, though, is can I infuse, if I'm Microsoft or for that matter, AWS, can I infuse not just the infrastructure, but the AI models into workflows, into agentic workflows and intelligent applications up the stack? Microsoft has a clear advantage position here with all the Copilot 365. AWS, if you listened carefully to Matt's speech at the reInvent, his keynote, he was reshifting, moving the debate between frontier models to frontier agents. Now, logically, they took frontier agents that were in areas like security and DevOps and coding, but how much further can they go up the stack to create and capture value at the applied level and in the agentic level? And I think the same question exists for Microsoft. The one that does it, I think they both will do a good job personally, but the one that does the better job is going to capture more of that pie.
And we had our AI reporter on last week. We were doing predictions. One of the predictions she had is that AWS might seek to acquire a major AI lab to sort of help kickstart that growth. Like you said, they've sort of fallen into this bucket where people don't think of them as having the best models right now. Could you see that happening in 2026?
I think that's unlikely. So why is it
Unlikely.
unlikely? They are emphasizing the classic things that AWS emphasizes: price, convenience, selection. So selection in this case comes in the form of Bedrock, which is their, use any model you want, including ours. They have their Nova models, including the very close relationship they have with Anthropic. And now it would appear that they're going to have better and better treatment, in partnership with OpenAI. So that's an area that I think they're doing quite well already, on selection. They're always going to be driving for being the lowest cost. And that's why they come out with things like the Trainium chips, things like the Nova models. So I think they've got a pretty good playbook there. I don't think they need to, and I think it'd be highly unlikely that they would buy one of the big model companies. Now, on the other hand, they have struggled consistently. There are outlier examples like their Connect service, but they have struggled up at the application layer. And I could see them buying more of a horizontal application style of company, like let's say a Notion, just to pick an example,
Right.
or something that's kind of a horizontal, helps you connect the dots of workflows and processes
Right.
across applications that are historically systems of record.
Which is basically what Microsoft I mean, Microsoft has the
Correct.
applications. AWS doesn't necessarily have that consumer-facing or enterprise-facing sort of application layer, you're saying?
That's correct. And I think that's where they, keep in mind that the important thing about the applications is that they accrete in value over time. So if I have a innovative interface, some voice, some text, so the modern interfaces of AI native companies, and then I have models I'm using. I mean, no application company in the AI world uses one model alone. They use a mix of models from a mix of model providers. And then you've got the data that is both initially used and then the outputs from that data from people using your application. This becomes a reasoning flywheel. And you need the application layer to drive the total reasoning flywheel. That's why AWS started with things that they have a reasoning flywheel in, like security, like
Hmm,
DevOps. And
right.
so they've got to keep moving up that stack.
So, and I know Notion is just a name that we throw out
Yeah.
there, but if you were to think of names, area, who could you see AWS going after in that
Yeah,
in
well,
that bucket?
the reason I mentioned Notion was because I was on the board of Smartsheet that got taken private at the beginning of this year by
Right.
Blackstone and Vista, and I thought that that would have been a good one for Amazon to buy. They did just fine with that acquisition, on the private equity side. But there's these horizontal workflows that exist across applications that I think are very interesting candidates. Now, I don't think that they would buy an Atlassian. I think that's too big of a bite, or a ServiceNow for that matter. But something more, Airtable, Notion, these kinds of companies seem to me to be, more likely to be in the category of things they'd be interested in. The one other area would be things that enable, identity. You just saw ServiceNow buy an identity company in Visa. So some of the identity layers, possibly in Okta, that would be an interesting place to enable, again, cross process, cross system of record workflows that could be living very easily and leveraging from all of the underlying AWS services. Back to my earlier point, they re-accelerated. I mean, they are growing the business well over $20 billion a year. There's not many software companies that have gotten to $20 billion in revenue a year, and AWS grew last year over $20 billion.
Right, right. Well, Matt, I want to thank you for coming on. There was another category of things that we didn't get to talk. I wanted to talk about your observations from 25 years now at Madrona. It's I was reading your bio this morning. 2000 is when you started. So I'll tell you what. Come back on the show in 2026, and we'll talk about some of your reflections from 25 years in venture, because that is definitely a topic I want to get your taste on. And happy holidays. We'll talk to you again very soon.
Happy holidays. Thanks so much, Akash. Enjoy being
Talk to
on.
you soon.